I want to start this preview video by painting a picture of my first experience facing down the Nightlord known as Gladius, Beast of the Night. We were the third team of my event group to reach the three-headed beast, and we desperately wanted that bronze medal. We did well in the first stage of the boss, but then it split into three and we were pushed to the brink, as one hound each pushed us to the edges of the map and split us up. Myself and my friend Nathan were downed, just as the boss was down to his last pixel of health, and we thought it was all over. Yet our final member, Griff, held his water, and instead of panicking and trying to revive us, he took one final swing and struck down the beast. The crowd of people who had grouped around us to watch our attempt erupted in cheers, and it was an awesome feeling, a feeling that Nightreign offers the player in abundance. So hey everyone, SmoughTown here, and I am delighted to report that I was lucky enough to attend a preview event in Frankfurt, where I got to play 7 hours of the game, and in that time, we were able to face one of the 8 Night Lords. You heard me correctly, there isn't one single Night Lord. There are 8 main bosses in this game, and so while I got to play the game for a significant portion of time, we really only sampled a fraction of what the game had to offer. In this video, I will be talking you through my experience, the structure of the game, and what you can expect when you play the game on launch. But I just want to headline this video by telling you that Nightreign is an absolute blast, and genuinely some of the most fun I've had with a game in years. And I want to give Bandai Namco a massive thank you for inviting me to this event, as it was just so much fun. I am also happy to confirm that Nightreign has a release date of the 30th of May, so we won't need to wait long until we get to play the full game. What we played is the same segment of game that players will be experiencing in the upcoming network test, so we won't be spoiling anything beyond that. So grab your fellow Nightfarers and let us dive into the world of Elden Ring Nightreign. So later in this video, I will talk you through how myself and my team went on to beat the Nightlord Gladius 4 times, as I believe we developed a really good strategy to use our time, and we utilised the various classes to great effect. However, I think we need to start by explaining what Nightreign actually is and how it plays. It all starts at the hub Roundtable Hold, which is where you can manage your characters, relics, and it is also where you can launch expeditions. The player characters are sort of set classes, with their own unique abilities, passives and starting weapons. There are going to be 8, and we got to try 4 of them in our build: Wilder, Guardian, Duchess, and Recluse. One of the many things I loved about the game was how meaningful these classes are. They each have strengths and weaknesses, and a well-balanced team really helps you overcome the odds. I'll speak more on the classes and what those abilities were later on, but for now I want to talk about how the game actually plays out. Each expedition is essentially defined by the Nightlord who is waiting for you at the end. In our case, we could only select one, but in the full game you will be able to choose different Nightlords as your final target. Once you've chosen your expedition, you then queue for matchmaking, and you are free to run around Roundtable and take care of other business while you wait. When matchmaking, you can of course create passwords, meaning you are only paired with your friends. Additionally, there are options for those who only have one friend to play with. You can select the option that pairs you with one password player, but the third slot will be filled with a random player. I'm sure this option for those who are only planning to play with a single friend comes as a great relief. It has also been confirmed that you can play solo and offline. When you are matched up, you drop straight in, and you basically drop into a map via Spirit Falcon, and it is much like Fortnite. It is a set circular map, and you can mark locations on your map to indicate where you would like to head to first. Once landed, you can do what you want with your time. Hunt mini-bosses, look for flask shards, farm enemies, or look for loot. But time is indeed your enemy, as a ring of fire will close in on you. Again, much like other battle royales, where the survivable zone of the map gets smaller and smaller. The centre of the map will eventually be marked by a golden spirit tree that lingers in the air, a clear visual marker that can help if you are running out of time. I can't say precisely, but I would estimate that each day lasts only about 15 minutes, The zone compression is very aggressive, and so you need to take it seriously. If you have business in the outlying parts of the map, I would make it quick. In our first attempt, we grossly underestimated this feature and spent a good part of our session just running from the flames. When the playable zone is restricted to one small circle, you come to the end of the day and you must fight an end of day boss, and if this is the end of day 1, the flames will recede following the boss defeat and you get another day to explore and prepare. If it is the day 2 boss, then you will immediately proceed to day 3 and face your chosen Nightlord. To more clearly illustrate this, I will explain the full expedition structure. You get day 1 exploration, then a day 1 boss. You are then given day 2 exploration, and then a day 2 boss. Following the day 2 boss, you immediately proceed to day 3, which is just the Nightlord Boss. In short, you have 2 days to best prepare to face the Nightlord, and there are many ways to do this. You can level up, you can upgrade your weapon, or you can upgrade your heals with shards, just as you would in the base game. To talk a minute about bosses, the impression we got is that the end of day bosses depend on which Nightlord you have chosen, as we seem to have a potential rotation of 2 variants per day. So on day 1 we would either face the Centipede Demon or the Demi-Human Queen and Swordsman duo, which by the way was actually quite challenging. On day 2 you could face either Morgott, called the Fell Omen, or you could face the Draconic Tree Sentinel, backed up by 2 mounted Leyndell Knights. Again, the latter of these was absolutely solid, and we found it to be the most challenging fight in the entirety of the gameplay segment that we got to play. All of these bosses have new moves from what you'd expect in Elden Ring, and so Morgott was no pushover either, with many teams ending their run at the hands of the Fell Omen. Incidentally, Morgott has a more terrifying feature, and that is his ability to hunt you down during the exploration phase of your adventure, meaning he can appear even out with his set encounter at the end of day 2, while you are still out in the field. He does not care if you are ready or not. He appeared to us right in the middle of a mini boss fight, and it was extremely difficult to manage everything on screen. When he does appear like this, he actually targets one player in particular, which is evidenced by a red target appearing over the relevant player. We found that it is more or less impossible to break aggro from the targeted player, so you can certainly use this to your advantage. Though the targeted player is under immense pressure, and it only ends when his target is dead, or the Fell Omen is. Moments like this are high pressure, but they certainly make the experience feel fresh. To help with the pressures of time, one of the main gameplay features that sets Nightreign apart from Elden Ring is the movement, and this is potentially my favourite thing about Nightreign so far. The base movement speed is already far faster than Elden Ring, but when you press into sprint, it feels as though you are moving as fast as Torrent. Perhaps even faster, to be honest. There are spirit springs all over the map that can be used without Torrent, and these allow you to scale large vertical heights very quickly. You can even use them to land on nearby keeps that are otherwise inaccessible. Additionally, you can now wall climb by jumping into the surface. However, it isn't unlimited. You cannot just jump up the face of a flat cliff face, there need to be ledges or grooves you can jump off. But it is a very satisfying feature, and it feels great with the overall faster pace of the game and movement. There are some interactions with the parkour that I didn't know about until I watched this B-roll, where you can see this Wilder jumping up the fire chariot in order to perform its special plunge attack. To further facilitate the fast-paced feel of movement is the fact there is no fall damage, and I do think this is a smart decision, given you need to make some quick decisions when the fire is moving in. Finally, you can find trees around certain points in the map that allow you to remount the Spirit Hawks, which actually have great control in terms of descent and dropping off when you want. Sometimes the pressure will get to you, and you or your team will go down. Unlike Elden Ring, you aren't insta-killed. Rather, you go into a downed state with a chance for revival. When you are downed, a timer starts, and if you aren't revived in time, you will die. Respawn, but lose a level. To help your teammate up, you need to hit them, either with a melee weapon or ranged. How many times you need to hit is determined by a 3-quadrant circle that will appear about their heads. Keep hitting it until this is depleted to revive them. In a boss fight, there is no timer, it's more a question of can you actually do it when you are under pressure from a boss. I think it's a great gameplay mechanic that jives well with the Souls-like gameplay and unique features of Nightreign. You could use the Duchess's ability to go invisible in order to make a safe revive, or you could do it from a distance with a bow and arrow. Teamwork is so powerful in Nightreign, and I like the way they have implemented revive. So I have spoken about the general structure of the game, but let's talk about what you will be spending your time doing during the exploration phases, and how you upgrade yourself and prepare for the Nightlord. Leveling up remains the most basic and straightforward way of increasing your power, with each run starting at level 1 and base stats. I also cannot overstate how powerful that first level up is, as you start with very low hit points and you really notice that first boost to your health bar. Leveling up isn't done like it is in Elden Ring with you allocating specific stats, rather you just generally level up all of your stats per level, with different weightings depending on which of the player classes you are. For example, the Guardian will always have more HP than the squishy Recluse, even at the same level. The highest level my team made it to was level 14, but I believe that 15 could be the max. And my reason for believing so is that there is a sparring area at Round Table Hold where you can test weapons. Here you can equip yourself with any weapon that you can find in the field, and you can level yourself up, the max level being 15 in these options. Additional to leveling up is the ability to get bonus stats and new weapons, and the best way to do this is by defeating mini bosses which can be found all over the map. Depraved Perfumer, Golden Hippo, Guardian Golem, Fire Monk and Miranda Flower, being an example of the many mini-bosses found across the map. When they fall, you don't get a traditional drop, rather an interactable object appears, and it offers you 2 to 3 randomized options for you to choose as your reward. These rewards can be powerful weapons, or they can be attribute upgrades, and we found that farming these rewards was one of the main ways we got powerful for the final boss. Some of these attribute upgrades can be fairly straightforward, like 10% more health, or they can be more utility based. For example, I got a perk that meant when you heal with your Crimson Flask, it also heals nearby allies. Then there are some more extreme perks you can unlock that are actually really exciting, my favourite being a Chain Lightning effect every time you roll. There was one run through where both myself and my teammate had this and it was so much fun. Both of us were just rolling through boss fights and doing massive damage. Another one I really like was a perk that activated every time you clicked into sprint, you would drop an area of effect frost attack, and I found this useful against the Nightlord, who I would bait into chasing me and taking some frost damage. These perks are something I really didn't expect and add some cool variety and gameplay interactions that keep the game feeling fresh, no matter how many runs you do. In regards to weapons, these are also quite fun. As far as I could see, the weapons are the ones you could find were solely from Elden Ring, rather than any of the prior Souls games. But all of them can drop from these mini bosses as random rewards, and they always have some kind of Ash of War. I wasn't able to test whether each weapon has a fixed Ash of War that comes with it, or it is random each time, but regardless, there are some very fun combinations that you can get. There are also no stat restrictions, so even as the squishier classes like Recluse, you can still use the biggest weapons. The only restriction on weapons is based on your level. Some of the more powerful weapons are of a higher class, and they require you to reach a certain level. I believe 9 was the requirement for the highest tier of weapons. This also means that the heavier classes can also use talismans and catalysts that they find in the field, and they work in a rather interesting way as well. Rather than players memorizing spells, each talisman comes equipped with 2 set incantations, meaning as soon as you have the talisman, you are ready to go with its incantations. There is also no weight limit. The only restriction is that you can have up to 3 weapons in each hand, and so these lack of restrictions and random nature of acquisition leads to a lot of fun builds and weapon combinations. And I tried a lot of weapons I didn't really ever build into in the base game. I remember that in my last run through, I played the Duchess, and I had Honslow's Petal Whip, the Erdtree Burial Watchdog Staff, and a Great Bow. So at mid-range I was dodging and applying bleed with the whip, before moving in close with the two-handed staff. Finally, my Great Bow meant I could still do some decent damage at range, and keep the boss moving towards a stagger. I briefly mentioned that you could also upgrade your weapons, and this is much in the same manner as it is in Elden Ring. You find a smithing stone, you bring it to an anvil, and there you go. However, I didn't interact with this much, nor found it necessary. I honestly didn't find smithing stones that often, especially those of the higher quality. I found that the stronger random weapons I found were very much capable of doing decent damage even against the Nightlord at base level, but perhaps they will become more important when you face the later Nightlords. The final element I want to talk about are relics, which are the permanent upgrades to your character that were hinted at in the IGN interview a few months ago. There are 4 colours of relics: red, blue, green and yellow, and each character has 3 slots for relics, and these slots correspond to a colour type, so you can't just equip any relic on any character. For example, I believe Wilder had 2 red and a blue slot, thus you could equip him with 2 red relics and a blue, and this is something you do at an altar in Round Table Hold. Once equipped, each relic confers a combination of stat upgrades and perks. You gain these relics after each run, win or fail, though we certainly got much more powerful ones when we had a successful run. Nonetheless, I do like that you get these even when you lose, because it feels like progression no matter what. My impression was that these relics have randomized attributes, and this is where the long-term progression could lie, with you doing repeat runs to get the perfect relic, and I certainly got some really strong ones. I'll give some examples of some of the more powerful ones that I got so you get an idea of what to expect. I had one called the Grand Burning Scene, and it conferred +1 arcane. If equipped on Wilder, his art activation would spread fire in the area, and finally it would refill the art gauge more quickly upon critical attack. I also had one called Brandy Drizzly Scene, and this one conferred the following: attacks inflict blood loss +2, partial HP restoration upon damage dealt, and attack power permanently increased. So as you can see with the latter one especially, these relics are significant and worth equipping every time you get back to Round Table Hold. If you have a relic you don't like or simply don't use anymore, then you can sell it for a currency. In our build we weren't able to use the currency, however we speculated that there will be a merchant at Round Table Hold who sells relics. Our reason for believing so was that there was a piece of art on the screen when you chose to sell relics that showed a warrior jar standing in front of a chest, and we could find that exact location in Round Table, but the merchant wasn't there. So we fully expect that this currency you earn from selling relics will be used to buy a selection of relics. With all that said, let us move to explaining the classes, powers, and the Nightlord Boss in some more detail. The classes were one of the elements that had me most excited, because the classes feel so distinct from one another and impactful. In our first run against the Nightlord, we kind of doubled up and played the easier classes, and we found it to be a struggle, albeit it was our first time. However, in subsequent playthroughs we found that when we had a more balanced party and we used our powers in concert, we felt much more powerful. With that said, let us go through the 4 classes we had access to, and each of their powers and playstyles. Each character had a passive, a character ability, and an ultimate, and alongside their attribute spread and starting equipment, these are what define each character. First of all, there was Wilder, who is the poster boy with the winged helmet. Wilder is the most balanced character, a close-range melee character with easy to use, yet powerful abilities. Good HP, good armor, and a good starting weapon means he is easy to pick up and use for any player. Wilder's passive also helps keep you alive, by providing a free save from a hit, which is very nice when you're learning the new move patterns of the bosses and enemies. His character ability was a hook and pull that would bring enemies towards you, or you to them if they are large, which is of course very useful if you need to deal with a ranged or squishy enemy. His ultimate ability is where it is at, however. It is a melee ranged charged blast attack with his wrist weapon that does massive stagger damage to the opponent, and in most cases I used it, it would be enough to stagger the boss I was facing and open them up to a critical attack. This can be used in combination really well with the Duchess's power, if you let them know you are about to deal some critical damage. Overall, a really comfy class to play that will always be welcome in any party, to bring some close range aggro and damage to the equation. The next class was my personal favourite, and that is the Guardian. The first time I've played a non-human character in a FromSoftware game. This is the heaviest class, and I personally like being in the thick of the action, and so this was the class for me. Its passive certainly leans into this, though it does make you somewhat static. However, he isn't just a tank, he has some great moves for combo setups and ways to get yourself out of the action. His character ability is a Whirlwind, which deals damage and throws enemies up into the air. A setup attack which can be comboed by another player who could hit the airborne enemy. However, it is his ultimate ability that really made me fall in love with him. It's called Wings of Salvation, and in this, the Guardian takes flight before bombing down onto the targeted enemy, and there are a number of benefits to this move. My main reason for liking it is that it can save your life. If you are close to death and under a lot of pressure, then this move does relieve that by throwing you way above and out of reach of your opponents. Additionally, it does decent damage and stagger, so you can team up with Wilder's ultimate to quickly open up a dangerous boss, before unleashing the Duchess's power to multiply this burst damage. The final effect is protective. After you land the dive bomb, if you continue to hold the power button, then you will set up a defensive area of effect that will increase your ally's damage resistance for as long as it is active. Aside from anything else, his ultimate just looks and feels amazing. Just a cool, easy to use class, and cannot recommend it enough. However, perhaps the most impactful class is one you've heard me mention many times now, and that is the Duchess, a great class that will be useful in any party. Duchess is a sort of rogue support class, who is focused on boosting the party's power and avoiding damage. Her passive is simple but useful, allowing her to dodge more frequently, feeling more like the hunter from Bloodborne in that regard. However, it is her ultimate and character abilities that really make her a powerful class, and she is the only class where her character ability is actually more powerful than her ultimate, at least in my opinion. It is called Restage, and it basically repeats the last 10 seconds or so of damage that the targeted enemy took, and this is visually represented by a spirit of the boss appearing and mimicking the movements of the boss when it took that damage. So for example, if I had staggered a boss and hit it with a critical attack, and did 1000 damage, then the Duchess could use Restage to repeat that damage, and you would see a spirit version of the boss taking that critical attack that I dealt earlier. Now, again, I didn't test precise numbers, but it looked like this repeated about 50% of the damage that was dealt in the past few seconds. This was really powerful against some bosses. There was one time when we were facing the Nightlord, and I believe we did a burst of about 6000 damage, and then our Duchess used a Restage, and it instantly added another 3000. The other thing that is crazy is that the Restage power is not the Duchess ultimate, it is her character ability, meaning it recharges within about 10 or 15 seconds. However, her ultimate finale is also nothing to sniff at. It basically makes the entire team invisible. At this stage, the boss or enemy cannot see you at all and just swings wildly, and again it's a great tool for relieving pressure from the team and giving them a moment to reset or revive an ally. We use this quite frequently during the final boss when it splits into 3 dogs, as we found this to be a high pressure part of the fight. You also can use it to land some free hits on the boss, so you could use it near the end to guarantee the win. The final class was the most complex and was known as the Recluse, essentially the spellcaster archetype. Her passive allowed to draw FP from opponents, who were marked by an element. The Recluse's character power was called Magic Cocktail, and it is essentially a magic explosion attack, the damage of which depends on what elements have been placed upon the enemy. The ultimate is called Soul Blood Soul, and we found this to be really powerful. It basically marks all enemies in the affected area, and if anyone on the team then hits the marked enemy, they get health and FP restored. Again, really useful in boss fights where resources can become limited. By the end, we were mainly running a Duchess, a Recluse, and a Wilder or Guardian, and we found this balanced squad was really powerful, especially when it came to the boss fights. With that said, let us briefly talk about the boss we faced and what I can remember of how it plays out. After the day 2 boss, some goo appears on the ground, and you are transported to a big door. Before this door is a final smith, merchant, and site of grace to do your final preparation. When you are ready, you push open the doors, and you end up in a large open arena, which seems like it is the template for all Nightlord fights, given some of the other screenshots we have seen. The fight starts immediately with Gladius in his first triple-headed form. His attacks are similar to the Red Wolf of Radagon, hard-hitting, fast-moving with lots of mobility. Gladius also has a sword on his back that is attached to a chain, and he will often spin it around in a large radius. Additionally, he has some flame and grab attacks, but for the most part, this stage 1 is not too difficult, especially if you all have good builds and plenty of heals. However, it is when he reaches about a third of damage that the difficult part of the fight begins. Gladius splits into 3, giving him the ability to split the team up and pressure everyone individually. Again, if you do struggle with this stage, I would recommend the Duchess Ultimate, as this can buy the team some breathing room. However, there are some good opportunities for damage here. Each of the dogs take damage that counts towards the main health bar, so if you group up, then you have a great chance to double up the damage. For example, in one of our runs, I used the Wings of Salvation Ultimate, and hit 2 of the wolves at the same time, thus doing twice the damage I would usually. Gladius will alternate between these 2 phases, reforming and breaking up intermittently, until you beat him. Overall, I think this is an amazing first boss, a good challenge to introduce you to the combat of the game, without being overly difficult, and I cannot wait to meet the 7 other Nightlords. I wanted to round out this video by talking about our general strategy each expedition, because I do believe we developed a fairly optimized way of using our time, and after we beat the Nightlord the first time, we did manage to defeat the boss every time after that for a total of 4 times. The key is preparation. The stronger you are at the start of day 3, the easier the boss becomes. So this is what we did. We would land and immediately beeline for the nearest Church of Marika. Here you grab an immediate upgrade to your healing, going from the base 3 to 4. Now what we found was that these churches were found on the outer reaches of the map, and thus are the places you will lose access to as soon as the fire starts moving in. Thus we would immediately beeline to the next church we could see, which was usually directly south of the first church we went to. This means that within the first 5 minutes of our run, we would already have 2 extra heals, which makes a massive difference. The next thing to remember is that the first level up needs to happen quickly. At level 1 you basically are like 2 hits from death, and level 2 immediately raises your HP to a respectable level. After this we would just spend the rest of our time farming mini-bosses, and in time you will learn where these largely lie on the map. To clarify, the points of interest are the same for each expedition, so you can do the same route every run if it works for you. These will only get mixed up when you go after different Nightlords. Farming these bosses gives you access to plenty of weapons, perks and runes to upgrade. And for day 1 our aim was to get to level 6 or 7 and have a decent weapon each. After the day 1 boss, grab 1 more Church of Marika to bring you to 6 heals, and you will get 1 more upgrade after the day 2 boss, meaning you will be at 7 for the Nightlord, and we found that to be more than enough, Again, just farm mini bosses for powerful perk and weapon combinations, and we usually ended up at level 12 to 14 for the final day. We found all of this preparation made us borderline overpowered for the final boss, and if you use your abilities and characters well, then you will find victory. So that's it everyone, that was my experience with Elden Ring Nightreign. A brilliant time all around, and I hope those participating in the network test this week have as much fun with it as I did. Please let me know if you have any questions about the game in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer it. Consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. As a lore-focused person, I will be tackling whatever lore the game gives us. But until next time guys, I will see you in Limveld. Take care and have a wonderful evening.